The Steelers are the gold standard in the NFL. And apparently the black standard too. Triple entendre, don't even ask me how. The franchise is tied for the most Super Bowl wins among all teams, currently led by a black head coach who simply refuses to have a bad season, and one of, if not the only team that has been competitive every single decade since black people have been allowed to vote. But the main architect of their original dynasty has not gotten his proper due, even though he was with the team for almost 48 years in all 6 of their championships. The name of that architect is a Mr. Bill Nunn Jr., assistant personnel director / head scout / the ultimate secret weapon. And if you want to know how this HBCU grad turned sports writer turned executive turned this formerly poverty franchise around into the NFL's model of success, well, sit back and let me tell you. Hey, like, comment, and subscribe. Do not make me come back here and tell you again.
When you talk about the Steelers, it's hard to write their history without Bill Nunn being a big part of it.
The first thing you gotta realize is that the Nunn family is royalty. Some of y'all heard the name Bill Nunn and thought of Radio Raheem from Do the Right Thing. Close, but not quite. That's his son, Bill Nunn III. But our story really starts with Bill Nunn I, who was the managing editor of the Pittsburgh Courier, who in those days was the leading black-owned newspaper in America. See, there was this crazy thing called segregation going on, so they needed such things. High-key, we still do, but that's for a different video. Huh? Oh, yeah, right. See, kids, a newspaper is this. After graduating from HBCU, West Virginia State, Nunn Jr., who was also a standout basketball player, seen here with Chuck Cooper and Earl Lloyd, who became the first black players drafted and to play in the NBA respectively, decided to turn down an offer from the Harlem Globetrotters, true story, and joined Nunn Sr. at the Pittsburgh Courier, starting his career on the path that I'm not even sure he knew was going to be the rest of his life. Nunn's most notable contribution to the paper was his connection to HBCU sports, specifically football, because during his tenure there, he put the Black College All-America team together. Some notable alumni of this list includes Mississippi Vocational's David Deacon Jones, Morgan State's Leroy Kelly, and Art Shell from then Maryland State, now known as Maryland Eastern Shore. For the young bucks watching this, that's 3 Hall of Famers I just listed. And we're still not even at the Steelers part yet. By 1966, 38 of Nunn's All-Americans were either earning paychecks in the NFL or the AFL, and the leagues were definitely starting to take notice. But one team in particular decided to take it a step further.
It was Bill Nunn's foresight that helped transform the Steelers from a blank canvas into a perennial powerhouse.
The story of how Bill Nunn actually joined the Steelers varies slightly based on who's telling it. This is the story that makes the most sense to me, based on my research. In 1967, Dan Rooney, son of the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who went on to own it himself, we covered him in the last video about Johnny Cochran, took notice of Bill Nunn criticizing the Pittsburgh Steelers for not having any black players. But through reading those critiques, he actually began to like Nunn's work with the Courier and the Black All-America team, specifically asking why he didn't know about any of these players, and sought out Bill Nunn himself to pick his brain. First question he asked is why he never seen Bill Nunn around the team's press box. And Nunn responded, because I'm in Pittsburgh. I make these lists of these incredible black players every year. And I hear from so many other teams except for the one down the street. Clearly, I am not welcomed here. And Dan Rooney said, you know what? You right. And we currently suck. The players you scout clearly don't. So how's about a job? Help us out a little bit. Bill Nunn obviously said, yeah, I kind of have one of those already. That's why I'm here. So they started as a part-time scout that eventually became full-time 2 years later. That story feels the most right to me, at least. But the more important part, after only 7 winning seasons in the 30 years of the Steelers' history before, the moment Nunn entered the building, the Steelers finally had their blowtorch to shape what we now know as the steel curtain.
It doesn't matter to us where a prospect is. As you know, we have quite a few prospects from smaller schools.
If you're familiar with the Steelers in the 1970s, you kind of know how this story ends, but you're here for the how, so let me cook. 2 years after Nunn joined the team, Pittsburgh also signed a coach. Some guy named Chuck that was pretty decent, I don't know. But when Coach Chuck was hired, it was only 24 hours before the NFL draft. And as the then youngest coach in league history, he needed to lean on the guys that the Steelers already had in place for draft guidance. Noel was already somewhat familiar with Nunn's work from his past coaching positions, so he was a natural choice. The Steelers held the 4th overall pick that year, facing a choice between highly regarded Notre Dame quarterback Terry Hanratty and a defensive tackle from a small school in North Texas by the name of Charles Green. We might know him as Joe, or more specifically,
Black makes me Joe smile.
Nunn, being the only voice of black in other small Southern schools in the room, pounded the table for me and Joe Green. He just knew that this was the guy to build the Steelers defense around. Others in the room argued for Hanratty, claiming pedigree and prestige and dog whistle, dog whistle, dog whistle. Ultimately, Nunn won out, but they were still able to draft Hanratty in the second round. Now let's compare that choice, shall we? In their rookie season, Joe Green went on to win Rookie of the Year and make the Pro Bowl. Terry Hanratty went 0-5, throwing 8 touchdowns to 13 interceptions, and the Steelers had to draft yet another quarterback the following season to make up for that mistake. So after seeing how well that worked out, Coach Chuck went back to Nunn and said, hey, what else you got? And the next thing he had was a player so good that the league literally had to change the rules so he couldn't dominate them anymore. In the third round, the Steelers drafted Southern University star quarterback Mel Blount, another Hall of Fame piece of the Steelers' soon-to-be championship puzzle. But the Nunn magnum opus was 1974, where in a draft that featured 5 Hall of Fame players, 4 of them were drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers: Lynn Swann, Jack Lambert, John Stallworth, and Mike Webster. Now, as to how many of the 4 were directly scouted by Nunn, reports vary. The numbers range from 1 to all 4. There is one infamous story from this draft that confirms that one. It's the story of Alabama A&T's John Stallworth. Nunn and other scouts around the league went down to watch Stallworth work out during the evaluation season. And when it came time for Stallworth to run his 40, he recorded a time that was slower than everybody expected, partially due to the track being wet, and the whole quality of it being lower because of the whole underfunding of black college thing that's still going on today. But here's where the power of Bill Nunn's relationships came in. He knew, based on Stallworth's reputation in the black college world, that there's no way that time was accurate. So he secretly stayed in the Alabama A&M coach's office to watch the film again. The next day, he got Stallworth on a dry field and got the times he was looking for, which apparently he also never told Stallworth, even in his last days. A few months later, Stallworth was in black and gold and was part of one of the most iconic wide receiver duos in NFL history. Now, it's not often that you can point to one draft class that immediately changes a franchise, but in 1974, the Steelers knew that this was the one. When that season ended with them holding up their first Lombardi trophy in team history. But it was far from their last. Armed with their one-man pipeline to HBCU superstars, drafting a league-high 24 between 1969 and 1975, and the key to small schools all over the South, the Steelers now had their infamous Steel Curtain dynasty of the 70s. 4 Super Bowl trophies, 10 Hall of Famers, and one league that was changed from that point on forever.
This was a team that relied on blue-collar players as much as black and gold legends, and each could be equally proud to be part of one of pro football's greatest dynasties.
So clearly the peak of Nunn's time in the NFL was the 70s dynasty. Kinda hard to top that level of success. Only one franchise in the entire league did it. But Nunn stayed with the team until he passed in 2014. So the question is, what was his role in the scouting department after such a historically high level of success? And the answer is kinda everything. As the Steelers' assistant personnel director and then head scout after he attempted to retire in 1987, but the game was calling him like the Green Goblin ass. He had to come back. He was the Steelers scouting grand poobah, a Yoda-like figure, if you will, with knowledge of pretty much every prospect past and present. The best example of this is when Steelers coach Mike Tomlin got hired in Pittsburgh. Nunn introduced himself by saying, "Hey, I know you, because I know your dad. I had him on my Black All-American team in 1967. Looked it up in the archive, and sure enough, fullback, Edward Tomlin Sr., Hampton University, 1967 Black All-American team." Nunn is one of the only people without the last name Rooney that has been a part of all 6 Super Bowl wins in Pittsburgh. And in 2018, he was inducted into the Steelers Hall of Honor. And then in 2021, Canton, Ohio came calling, inducting the super scout and dynasty builder into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, making him the first black person to be inducted into the contributor category.
Your dad, because of his many years of contributions to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the National Football League, and the great game of football, is now been nominated to the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Moment of vulnerability here. I tend to only make video tributes like this about people who are still with us on this earth, because I firmly believe in giving people their flowers while they're still here to smell them. Acknowledging history makers in real time or even early, and if you've seen my content on Black History Month or anytime these past 2 years, you'll notice that trend. And no person shows why I find this so important than Bill Nunn, the man responsible for opening the HBCU to NFL pipeline. The builder of the Steel Curtain Dynasty wasn't inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame until 7 years after he passed. His family was rightfully honored to accept the induction on his behalf. But man, wouldn't it have been great to watch him surrounded by the players whose lives he changed, the HBCU coaches that he cultivated relationships with, and the Steelers fans who owe him an unpayable debt, deliver a speech to highlight his journey of living every sports writer's dream, coming fresh off the printing press into the front office and becoming one of, if not the best to ever do it. But alas, he never got the chance to do so. But his legacy does live on in those same players, in those same coaches, hopefully in this video, and on the nameplate of the Pittsburgh Steelers draft room, as a reminder to all who entered of the standard that was set and will always need to be lived up to.